Hello, biologists. Today we're going to talk about human population and we're also going to talk about community interactions. So I want you to check out the census.gov population clock. I'm going to put a link to it on Blackboard so you can see how the human population is growing, both the United States and the world. It's a fascinating website. I highly recommend that you poke around and look at it. But what's the overall point in talking about human population? Well, humans are experiencing exponential growth. This is the graph of time. We have 12,000 BC, and then right about now, and number of people, billions of years here. So for a long period of time, our population was quite low growing, a really small R, quite stable. The bubonic plague hit and killed off a good amount of us, and then we rebounded. And then right here, right about the Industrial Revolution, when we started getting medical advances, our population just took off. We are now well over 7 billion people. This graph is a little bit dated, but it's changing so constantly. This is a pretty good representation of what the overall scale looks like. It is a strong J-shaped curve. So what is the carrying capacity of Earth for humans? We don't know. That is an important question. And we also know that we can alter the carrying capacity. So your book is going to go into detail of that. But this population growth curve is something that as population ecologists, we should be a little bit concerned about and be thinking about what the consequences might be. Another way that we can think about human population growth is with population pyramids. So population pyramids divide humans based on biological sex and then based on age brackets. So we have you as pre-reproductive, which is 0 through 14. Now we know that you could reproduce at 14, but on average, people do not. So pre-reproductive, then your reproductive years going until like 45. On average, menopause hits about 50, but you're less likely to have kids past 45 than you are at 30. So these are ranges intentionally to try and encompass our averages. And then we have your post-reproductive years, 46 through 100. Because we have a type 1 survivorship curve, we have less people at the top of the pyramid because our species is more likely to die the older we get. So this pyramid here is expanding. Why is it expanding? You have to think about these people in the pre-reproductive years. As they age, this width of their pyramid will continue upward. Only a few of them will die. And those people, once they get into the reproductive years, on average, most have children. And so they're going to increase the number of pre-reproductive people by having their own kids. And the pyramid expands like this as it goes upward. For a stable population, you have roughly the same amount of pre-reproductive and reproductive people in your population. And then it's a pretty slow curve up to your high point. There are more post-reproductive adults in this population than in an expanding population. Then we have a shrinking population. In a shrinking population, there are less pre-reproductive people than there are reproductive adults. I almost call these adults, they're not adults. So less pre-reproductive than reproductive, and there's even more post-reproductive. So the trend is you're on average having less children and your population is shrinking. I've got a TED Talk for you to watch that's going to show these pyramids in action and discuss what's going on with them and how they're used to measure populations. Really interesting. I'm excited for you to check it out. Let's continue talking about age structure. Our United Nations has given us 3 estimates of what's going to happen to the human population. And here we are, we're like 2026, which is right here. This is where our data is real. And then here is our speculation. If our fertility rates remain high, which means on average, each woman will have 2.5 children, then by the year 221, which may be in your lifespan, we will have what is that, 16-ish billion people on Earth. Currently, we have about 8 billion. So if that is accurate, you may see the human population double by the time you are an older adult. If we have a medium fertility rate, which means the average woman has 2.1 kids, by 2100, we'll have just over 11 billion. And if our population fertility rate decreases and women have 1.7 children, then we will see our population grow a little bit, but then start to reduce. And by 2100, we will have less people on Earth than we have right now. Which of these is going to happen, we don't know. But these are the 3 projections of what may occur in the next 75 years. So very interesting. That is our population for human discussion. And now we're going to transition over to communities. So what is a community? A community is more than one species interacting in a single place at a single time. Here I have an example of bears, and they are eating the carcass of something. And I also have wolves. So bears and wolves hanging out together. These wolves want to scavenge this food, but the bears are currently eating it. When they are done with it, the wolves will come in. Beyond this, this community also includes all of these plants, the vegetation, what's inside of this river. Are there fish? Are there bugs? What kind of birds are in those plants? So a community is very inclusive. It's all of those living things together. When our organisms interact like this, it could be mutualistic, commensal, parasitic, or competitive. Right here, this is an example of competition. Here's a resource. Everyone wants the resource, but currently the bigger and stronger organism has access to the resource. They have outcompeted the wolves. They are benefiting. The wolves are languishing. They're going to wait until maybe the bears walk away, and then they will have access to it. Let's define each of these community interactions. So if we have a commensalism, one of your partners is going to benefit. That's what the plus means. But the other is unaffected. That's what the 0 means. An example of commensalism is like epiphytic plants. So the plant that grows on top of another plant, but not in the dirt, we call it epiphytic. Things like orchids and vines and moss and liverworts, all of those are epiphytic. We think that the moss would benefit because it gets a nice habitat to grow, but the tree that it's growing on is unharmed. Some people will argue that commensalisms don't actually exist, and it's really just that we don't understand the interactions between the species. And that's possible, but for right now, we think it exists. So commensalism, one benefits, the other is unharmed. In competition, both of the parties are harmed. If you think about something like the elephant seals competing for mates, they can really physically hurt each other and sometimes kill each other. So that is a net negative for both of them. Then we have consumption. Consumption is going to include eating plants, which is herbivory, predation, which is those wolves eating like a ground squirrel, and parasitism, which would be something like a tapeworm eating a host or a mosquito sucking your blood. In both of all 3 of these, one is benefiting, whoever is doing the eating is benefiting, and whoever is being eaten is hurt. It's detrimental to them. So we have one benefiting, one is harmed in the process. In a mutualism, both of the parties are going to benefit. So some fun examples are mycorrhizal fungi that we talked about last term. The fungi will surround the roots of a plant, and it will give the plant water. And in return, the plant will make sugars with photosynthesis and give it to the fungi. Both of those things are benefiting. Another example that we love is lichen. Lichen is a symbiosis between an algae and a fungus, and they both benefit. The algae gives the fungus sugars, and the sugar gives the algae a nice home and structure and protection. I like to think about my cat and I as a mutualistic association. I give the cat food and a place to live and toys to play with, and the cat gives me love, and so it's totally worth it. That's both of us benefiting. It's a mutualism. Let's look at some visual examples. Here's the mycorrhizae that we just discussed. This is a pine seedling, and this is in the lab. So this is a wallpaper background, and this is inside of a clear plexiglass dish. And this little seedling has grown 3 little roots. And this is all plant material. You can see the surface area is not that great. So this little seedling's doing okay, but when it's introduced to its fungal partner, all of this lightning bolt shaped threads, these are all hyphae and mycelium. Hyphae is singular, mycelium is plural, of the fungus. Now you can see the surface area has exponentially increased. So that is so much more surface area. This fungus is going to get a lot more water. It's going to make its own antibiotics, and it's going to give that to the plant. In return, this plant, it can do photosynthesis. Your fungus can't. Fungus do not have chloroplasts. They are not plants. And so it can't make its own sugar. And in return, the plant's going to make sugar and give it to its fungal partner. Both of them are benefiting. Here's our visual of our lichen. We've got several different types of lichen on this branch. Each one of these is composed of a different fungi and a different algae, and sometimes a cyanobacteria. And the fungi is giving structure to this organism, and the algae is making sugars and giving it back to the fungus. So everyone benefits. It's a mutualism. Here's commensalism. We have a host tree, and we have an epiphytic organ. Epi is upon, phytic is plant. So this orchid does not grow in the dirt. It would die in the dirt. Instead, it grows in the crooks of plants like this. The orchid is benefiting. It has a habitat that it wants. It's higher up, which means more sunlight. And we think that the plant is unharmed. And so it's a commensalism because benefit, but no harm or benefit for the host. Here's another example. I have all this moss here. This moss and this one all hanging down is going to be given a nice habitat, a place to grow, but we don't think it's harming the plant under it. So it's a commensalism. Then we have consumption. Here's an example of herbivory. I have an ungulate eating a plant. This ungulate is benefiting. It's going to survive. This plant is hurt. It's going to be harmed. Another example is predation, a cat hunting a mouse, and then parasitism. This is the fungus ergo, so it is in the Huilicochae family, and it causes what we call corn smut. So this fungus has infected these corn kernels and grown these giant tumors. So the fungus is benefiting because it's eating the corn, and the corn is being harmed because it's being eaten, but it's also ruining its chance to reproduce because each of these corn kernels is a seed of a next generation. Huilicochae is edible and delicious. If you get an opportunity to eat it, it's great. It tastes just like corn and mushrooms smushed together. Wonderful. It's a little bit ugly because it's bumpy and black, but it's really good. Highly recommend. Then we have 2 ways that we can classify our community interactions. We have within a species or between species. So we're going to use our prefix inter or intra. So inter is going to be between different species. And I always remember this because I think interstates go between states. And intra is within a species. I think intravenous drug, it's inside your veins. That helps me organize these 2 things. So we have competition that's between species, or we have competition that is within a species. Competition between species can be things like trying to get a habitat set up in a single tree. Like if there's good nesting sites in a tree, who gets the best one, competing for those resources. Competing within a species can be quite similar. So if all one species is in one place, trying to compete for space for growing or for foraging is also important. So whether or not it's inside or out of your species, we give it a different name. Further, we have interference competition and exploitation competition. So in interference competition, you're going to try and inhibit your competitor. An example is allelopathy, which is what plants do to harm their neighbors. So plants can't get up and move. The way that they fight back is they release chemicals into the dirt. Here we have an example. This is garlic mustard. Garlic mustard grows in our area. I took this picture on Kelly Butte in Portland. It's a horrible invasive, and one of the reasons it's a bad invasive is it leaches all these nasty chemicals into the soil that inhibit the germination of other seeds, and it creates a sterile soil that only the garlic mustard can grow on. So it benefits, but everybody else is harmed. And it's not actively killing the other plants, it's just interfering with their ability to survive. So it's not forcing them out, it's just making it a less desirable, less hospitable place. Then we have exploitation competition, and that's when one organism exploits resources that could be used by another. For example, a vining plant like English ivy. English ivy is an invasive plant in our area, and what it does is it climbs up the lengths of other plants and it grows on top of them. So it benefits because it gets access to the sun, but the other plant is harmed because it shades out the other plant that it's growing on. So it can essentially starve out trees by growing all over them. Another thing that our community interactions can create is warning coloration, which is also called aposematic coloration. So in this, you have colors like the pattern of a skunk or the black and yellow stripes on a bee or a wasp that indicate to other organisms that you are toxic or poisonous, or you have a sting, you are deadly, you are not to be messed with in some way. Another example that we know and like is the poison arrow frog, which is very brightly colored, and those bright colors indicate to other organisms not to mess with it. It's kind of like saying, look, I'm so dangerous, I want you to see me so that you stay away from me. That's the idea behind warning coloration. Another way that communities can interact is with mimicry. We have two types of mimicry. We have mimicry in which a harmless species mimics a harmful species, and then we have mimicry where harmful species all resemble each other. So for example, in Mullerian mimicry, are harmful species mimicking each other's? That's like bees and wasps. They both have the black and yellow pattern. They are indicating that they are harmful. That is Mullerian. In Batesian, you're going to have harmless species looking like harmful species. So here we have two wasps. These are harmful. They will sting you. Then we have three hoverflies. These hoverflies have no stingers. They are flies. They are harmless. And we have a wasp beetle. It is also harmless, but they have copied this pattern to indicate to other organisms that they are harmful, thus tricking them into leaving them alone. We also have standing defenses. I can say constitution, but I can't say that word, so go ahead and say it to yourself. But these are defenses that are always present, are going to try and help you with your community actions. For example, warning coloration, but also camouflage. So camouflage is called cryptic coloration or object resemblance, but camouflage is the word that we use most common. The example we have right here is a leaf katydid. So it's shaped like a leaf. The venation pattern looks like a leaf. And if that katydid, which is a bug, holds still, maybe a predator will think it's a leaf and just go away and not try and eat it. Another example of a standing defense, a defense that's always there, is having armor or weapons on you. So think like an armadillo, but also think thorns on a plant like a rose. We have escape behavior, running away. That's always a good defense. Plants can't do that, so they use toxins. That's the allelopathy that we just discussed. So a plant can be toxic leaching into the soil to deter other plants, or its body can be toxic like milkweed to try and get organisms to not eat it. In general, if you're out and you are curious if a plant is edible and you break it and it has milky sap, it's toxic. Don't eat the milky sap. Another option is schooling or flocking. So a group of fish that school together makes it harder to choose an individual and harder to pick off one of the population. This leads us to an idea of a co-evolutionary arms race. Here's how it works. If I have a butterfly that looks like it is inedible, then it will get eaten less. But if I have a bird that can tell the difference and starts to eat it, even though it looks inedible, it's going to have to change its approach. So then it's going to more intently look like a inedible butterfly, and the bird's going to have to adapt its process and figure out how to recognize it again. Another example is monarch butterflies eat a plant named milkweed. Milkweed is toxic, but monarch butterflies, as caterpillars, can eat and digest that plant. So the monarch butterfly caterpillar eats the plant becomes more toxic, the caterpillar increases its toxin resistance, the plant becomes more toxic, it increases resistance, and this is the idea behind the arms race, is we're constantly evolving and co-evolving to try and outwit our predators or escape our predators, and the predators get better and better as well. We have another term for this. It's called the Red Queen hypothesis. So the Red Queen was a character in Lewis Carroll's Through the Looking Glass book, and it's because of this quote. So go ahead and read that quote. The idea being you have to constantly change or your predator is going to catch up with you, and your predator has to constantly change or it will be left behind by the prey. When we think about populations, we also have to think about the term niche. So niche is an area in which something fits. So we say that like you found your niche. It's an area in which you fit. But in biology, a niche is going to go further. A niche is going to be everything that an organism needs to survive. That's food, shelter, water, space, habitat, mating display area, everything that your organism needs to survive. And that's interesting because if it's everything you need to survive, you can't share. And so we come up with this competitive exclusion principle. We have two species here, and we have the number of individuals using a resource, and we have the niche range. So we've oriented ourselves in this graph. Our first species has a bell curve shape. Here is where it niche ends, and this is how many individuals are using the resource. Species 2 is a weaker competitor. It would use a whole lot of the range that the stronger competitor uses, and it would have a lot of individuals using those resources. But with this species in the same habitat, species 2 is outcompeted. So it's competitively excluded from where it could be because there's a stronger competitor there. Your fundamental niche is what you theoretically could use without competition, and your realized niche is the area and the resources that you actually use when you think about who's competing with you in your community. Here's an example that we love to talk about. There are two types of barnacles, the big barnacle and the little barnacle. Our bigger barnacle has a range that goes from low tide to high tide, but not outside of the water. So this is all big barnacle. The little barnacle has a range that goes slightly outside the water to slightly under the water, and it would like to live in this full range, but it is outcompeted by the bigger barnacle. Thus, the bigger barnacle is limited to a smaller area. It is being competitively excluded, even though it could theoretically live in a larger niche. If our niches overlap, we can also do niche differentiation, which is also called resource partitioning. So in these, we are not going to exclude one competitor completely. Instead, both of the competitors are going to reduce their niches, and they're each going to get higher fitness. So now it's more of a sharing than an outcompeting. Here, this first graph is our setup. We have number of individuals using the resource, and we have our niche range on the x-axis. So we have species 1, and we have species 2. If they were both alone, they would have high fitness, but where they overlap, both of them have a lower fitness. So instead of maintaining this lower fitness, they both scooped their niches they differentiate their niches so they are no longer overlapping, and now they both have a higher fitness. Now, again, this is not conscious. Animals are not thinking about this. This is just how they compete and how they tend to interact within a community. Here's an example. I have a population of birds that are going to live in one tree. Let's look at the birds on the right first. We have all these different warblers. We're going to have foraging height, and we're going to have our tree in the center. If they all wanted the full tree, that would be a lot of competition and a huge amount of niche overlap. Instead, each different type of warbler takes a different part of the tree to forage. So if I am the myrtle warbler, I get the lower part of the tree, and I am not overlapped too much with the bay-breasted warbler. The bay-breasted warbler will take the inner part of the tree, as opposed to the Cape May warbler, which will take the top outer part of the tree. So they have partitioned up the resource, and they are sharing it. So that is niche partitioning, niche differentiation, or resource partitioning. Over on the left, this graph is showing us the Galapagos finch. So this is our Galapagos finch here. We have two different islands, Daphne Major, which I showed you a picture of, and then Santa Cruz. And we have percentage of finches sampled and the beak depth. When this one species of finch is alone on an island on Daphne Major, its range from its beak depth goes from 3.5 to 5.5. When it's on a different island and there's a separate species of finch, now it has competition. These beak depth are determined by what kind of foods they eat. So if there's another bird eating a similar food, they're going to have to figure out what to do. And what they did was they partitioned the resources, and their beaks changed in relation to that. So this other finch, it took the lower range, and this first finch took the higher range, and their beaks are modified because they're sharing the resources separately. They're not overlapping, they have partitioned them. I've got a really interesting video about niche differentiation to show you. I'll post it on Blackboard. I think it's really cool, and I'm curious to hear what you think. I hope you have a great day. Email me anytime. Bye.